Joining the show tonight, this man is DB's coach, special teams coordinator at St. Anselm College up in New Hampshire in a conference that I was just saying, I don't know if we've actually had anyone on from the NE10. He also, though, drops knowledge on a daily basis on Twitter about recruiting, advice for high school, college athletes alike. It's Coach Chad Braine. What's going on, Coach? How are you, man?
How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm
Excited to
excited.
get you on here. I mean, obviously, we've had a bunch of coaches on this show, but not many of them are just dropping these awesome nuggets out on the old X, Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it here. I scrolling through, man, it's a gold mine.
It is. I think that I think it's something that I learned back in college was like in the sports marketing world, like you got to promote your school, you got to promote yourself. And when we got to St. Anselm, we were trying to do everything in our power just to make ourselves marketable.
Oh, yeah.
And Twitter's been such a good thing. I mean, Twitter, I don't know if anybody really uses it a lot. I know I use it constantly. It's my lifeline for football. I don't know if the outside world uses it or not, because my timeline's all it is football and athletes and motivational people. But I do enjoy it.
That is awesome. I don't think maybe some outside people might not realize, but man, like football, as far as recruiting, especially at the college level is concerned, it lives on Twitter and all of the conversations and other things that happen on Twitter. You guys are a part of it. It's been cool to see some of the different things you've brought to the platform, which is fun. But from the perspective of recruits and their families, they have to be pretty appreciative of that as well because of that transparency. What kind of feedback do you get from them typically?
We had a visit yesterday, and I think I had 4 or 5 people just say, "Hey, thank you very much for sharing some of the information." I try not to be like condescending or like putting people down,
Yeah.
but in some ways I am telling them the truth. Again, it's mostly because of our everyday interactions that we have with recruits and just being in the camp business and the recruiting world for 25 years. I sometimes just see kids struggling with it, especially at our level,
Mhm.
and parents struggling with it. I think it's, again, like if people retweet our posts, it's getting St. Anselm College out there more, which is what we want.
100%. I remember sitting down in high school, my junior, coming towards maybe the fall camp of my senior year with our defensive coordinator at the time, Brad Thomas, who I believe is now the head coach at Hazlitt downstate in Michigan. But regardless, he sits down with me, and him and I obviously had a great relationship. And Kobe, where do you see yourself? You knew I wanted to play college ball, but where do you see yourself realistically? What level? What's our goals? Wanted to make sure that my goals aligned with maybe the work ethic I'm putting in, or what's realistically feasible for somebody with my skill set, my measurables, those kind of things. And I remember he came on and said, he's like, I think you're a mid to higher level D2 guy, and I could see you being maybe in the GLIAC. Spoilers, he was right. Here I am at Northern in a pretty solid conference, playing some good ball. But I remember in that moment feeling, man, like, that's a little bit, there's a little part of you that says, man, you wish maybe something else would have come out of his mouth. But, the sooner that happens, obviously different people take it different ways, but you have that conversation with someone that's going to be real with you. That changes a lot. And if you take it the right way, can really motivate you to be the best at that. And then you maybe even go and exceed that. That's not penciling in, due to a certain spot, but talk about those conversations that you potentially have with guys coming out of high school.
I mean, I remember my conversation with my school as well, and my coach even went a little further. He said you could play at East Stroudsburg, Millersville, Shippensburg, but I don't know about Indiana, PA.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
the top of the line D2. And I thought that was great. I think that the problem we have now is kids go and they search for the answer that they want. So the high school coach, their words are often in one ear and out the other ear. Most high school coaches are real with the kids, but the parents hear certain other things. And all it takes is one person to tell a young man, I think you could play at Villanova. I think you could play at Georgia. I think you can do this or do that. And they run with it. And I think that's the biggest thing. You're always searching for affirmation and somebody telling you what you want to hear. And often the truth is washed away with what you want to hear. because it's crazy now in 24 recruiting and what you're seeing. When I was growing up years ago, you didn't see it. You just didn't see it. You didn't, it was so rare to see a Division I player that it was in the newspaper and that was a big deal. But now, because you're seeing hundreds of Division I kids getting offered, and it just seems like it's easier to do in the social media age than it really is,
Yep.
because you're seeing it everywhere. When we were growing up, you didn't have that, so you didn't see it.
No, I get that. And the confirmation bias there is, you kind of touched on at the beginning, that can be killer, because if you only search for the answer that you're looking for, that could potentially, and that's just life in general, and certainly not just recruiting, but if you only search for the answer you're looking for, you may not get very far. You could be digging yourself actually into a deeper hole by closing some of those other doors that potentially, depending on timelines and other things, could be closed for you and lead to great opportunities. So that's a great point. And the transparency from a recruiting standpoint that you talk about in this day and age where everyone is connected and it feels as though you see everything, when in reality that is very much not the case. That transparency from a recruiting perspective for your coaching staff probably becomes somewhat of a selling point. Am I correct in that assumption there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not fair to write a kid off after his junior year,
Mm-hmm.
because no, there's a ton of reasons why they may not have hit in their growth spurt.
Especially at
They may
D2, right? With the calendars being so much different.
absolutely, absolutely. So, like for us, we look at it in basically three ways. Number one, we're looking at academics. Okay. If you don't qualify for academics, it doesn't matter. You need to have a 3.0 core with us. But we're looking at that kid. Okay. His film is lights out. Like, we want to offer him. All we want to do is see him at camp and see that he's somewhat like his film. If he's anything like his film, he's going to get offered. And then there's those kids like, okay, he has the potential, but we got to see him at camp and see him in person.
Yep.
And then there's the third kid that their film isn't that great, and you still want to see him in person. Okay, they're in person, they're not very good either, unfortunately. I shouldn't say very good. They're not up to standard for the Division
I hear
II
you. Yeah.
scholarship level. And then you sort of take them off your recruiting board. But you always can go back and look at their senior year. And so we're never going to write anybody off. I will tell you that when kids come to our camp and they say, "What do you think, coach?" I will say, "Hey, we can't offer right now, and this is the reasons."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell, I don't want to just say, "Well, because you're not good enough." That's a cop out. That's an excuse. I want to say, okay, if you're 5'8" and you're a corner, you got to be able to run a 4.5, 4.6. Or, if you're an offensive tackle and you're undersized, you better be able to run very well. Like, we want to give them like concrete answers at why they aren't good enough, or why, yeah, we are going to offer you,
Absolutely.
and so I think that's a big thing with us, is just telling them why or why not. There are some situations where it's going to be, I do want to see your senior film. Like, I'm not kidding. I want to see you take the next step as a quarterback, as an offensive tackle. And there's a lot of those tweeners that we are going to keep recruiting. The bottom line is, for a young man, like, if you come to camp and they're not wild about you, they're not grabbing you afterwards, that's not a good sign. And some coaches aren't going to come out and tell you, and I'm not going to go out of the way and go down my list and say, we're not offering, we're not offering, we're not
Yep.
offering. But if somebody asks, I will say, you need to do this, 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 or this.
Yeah, and again, that information could be just as beneficial, because now you at least have something to go back to, as opposed to being strung along and having a belief and something that isn't going to happen. Now, to stay and kind of close off the idea of the recruiting talk, you guys had your junior day, it looked like just yesterday, correct?
Yep.
And
Yep.
It kind of differs school to school, but I guess more specifically at St. Anselm, talk about what exactly a junior day entails and why it might be different than a camp or maybe an unofficial visit during the season, like a game day type of thing.
I mean, a junior day and the game day are very similar. They're not getting, it's sort of like a teaser and appetizer.
Okay.
For us, coach is talking for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They're meeting all of us. They're seeing us. We're shaking their hands. They're taking a tour of our beautiful campus. And the thing that we do is we're going to make sure they see practice. They're going to be on the field. They're going to see how we interact with our players. And then they're going to have a little bit of interaction as well. And it's different than a camp because at a camp, they're not seeing our team. They're not seeing our interaction with them. And the other thing is, like, even though it was a Sunday, they're seeing the students. They're seeing how the community really is. And it's really just an opening, like, appetizer, like, hey, this is what it is. Some kids are going to go home and be like, no way. A lot of times we have, for whatever reason, we get, recruits that leave and they're like, I can't believe it was this nice. I can't believe it was
Yeah.
this big. I can't believe the guys were that big. I can't believe they were that fast, So I think a lot of it's an eye-opening experience in a positive way.
I hear you. And that can be, like you said, it's both ways, but I'd assume it's a lot of the latter for guys that maybe don't expect much out of a Division II squad. But you guys did, go back kind of on that Twitter note, you did a Twitter space with your coaching staff, it looked like. And I'd have to imagine you were a part of it. I didn't see this until just recently, so I didn't get to tune in right before I was prepping kind of for the show. But talk about what spurred that idea and what made that happen, because that's not something you see very typically from a coaching staff.
Again, that was Coach Adam,
Okay.
his idea, our head coach, who's been very innovative on the Twitter world. In fact, when I was at East Stroudsburg, they were one of the first teams to put an offer graphic out.
Okay.
Okay,
There
and
you
I
go.
saved it. I saved it on my phone. I didn't know Coach Adam at all, and it's funny because we had a lot of people that we knew in common, but that's a whole nother story. But he was one of the first to make the offer graphic, and I remember saying that, and I'm like, I really, really like this. I think it's great, and he's always trying to do just innovative things to sort of again draw attention. And that Twitter space, all it was do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. It honestly was more of a like, here's the truth. We're telling you the truth about football recruiting. We're not sugarcoating anything. We're telling you the truth and just sort of giving people information because there's so much misinformation out there because recruiting is a one-shot deal. And then you have a new round of kids. And unfortunately, as I mentioned in the opening, they're only listening to what they want to hear sometimes, and they only see the bright lights of the big time.
Yeah.
And recruiting is a very, very stressful process. It's not all about the graphics and the jersey try-ons and the overnight visits and all that stuff. Like, it's a stressful process for everybody involved.
It is, and it's stressful even when you're not juggling Power 5 offers and trying to make a decision where you're going to spend at least 4 years of your life, assuming you stick it out and